Ukraine has abandoned 4 years of caution over Belarus analysis. This is interesting. This is interesting news because recently Ukraine has actually given Belarus a ultimatum that if it does not disable technology that helps Russia in its drone strikes in Ukraine, then Belarus would face consequences from Ukraine. And it seems like Belarus has actually caved. It seems like Belarus has caved to those demands, and it would be very interesting to read about what the analysis of the situation is. I suspect that Ukraine allows itself to have a strong position in relation to Belarus because it has a relatively stronger position in relation to Russia currently. So I believe that's why Zelensky feels like he can give Belarus such strong ultimatums because Russia is in no position, or that is the assumption, to do anything should Ukraine punish Belarus for supporting Russia. Belarus is almost certainly not about to join the war on Russia's side. Western military analysts see no sign of the troops buildup real invasion would need. And Belarus-owned Defense Minister Viktor Krenin has said openly that it would make no sense for his country to attack a neighbor unprovoked. And also keep in mind that if Belarus would tie up a lot of its military forces in Ukraine, that would be the perfect opportunity for opposition to seize power. That is definitely something that is on Lukashenko's mind, that if he exerts the armed forces of Belarus in a war, that could be very well a perfect window of opportunity for the opposition, which does train troops as well, to swoop in, oust Lukashenko, and actually install a democracy. So that will definitely be taken into consideration when deciding on whether or not to, for example, join Russia in an invasion of Ukraine. That makes it the last interesting question in the latest crisis between Ukraine and Belarus, which centers on Ukraine accusing Belarus of hosting relay equipment that helps guide Russian drone strikes and threatening to remove it by force if Minsk does not act. And apparently Minsk did cave in. Let us watch a video.
Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching News in Depth. Russia is mounting pressure on Alexander Lukashenko to deepen Belarusian involvement in the invasion of Ukraine.
And it's working, apparently.
Now to be weighing its
Apparently it's working, the pressure.
More openly than in any former stage of the ongoing war. And to talk about it and more, we're joined by Stuart Dowell, political editor at TVP World. Good afternoon, Stuart.
Hello.
So the ultimatum issued by Volodymyr Zelensky has apparently worked, and Belarus has turned off the devices allowing for Russian drones to hit the targets in Ukraine more precisely. But I'm wondering, how was this decision received if it was, in fact, Alexander Lukashenko's decision, how it was received in Moscow?
Apparently not well. We heard from Kremlin spokesperson Peskov that he regarded Ukraine's Zelensky's threats to take action against these relay stations as an aggression impinging on Belarusian sovereignty, if you can believe it.
I mean, what is Russia gonna do? Invade Ukraine?
The sovereignty argument over everything that we've seen in the last
very
few years.
interesting.
But it shows that Lukashenko is really walking a tightrope at the moment, as you suggested in your introduction. He doesn't want to antagonize the Ukrainians to the point where he receives strikes against them, because he sees how powerful the Ukrainians are with their long-range strikes. But even these aren't actually long-range, because these relay stations are quite close to the Ukrainian
Well,
border.
it's not just about the relay stations, because apparently the Ukrainians have listed some 500 potential targets in Belarus. So what else are they worried about? Do they worry about?
Well,
True.
this highlights how integrated Belarus is in Russia's war economy, and Belarus is kind of like a military space for Russia. The 500.
I mean, let's be honest. Just Belarus is just extension of Russia at this point. That is the reality of the situation. The separation between Belarus and Russia is much more just illusionary than it would seem. I know that Lukashenko, especially before the full-scale invasion, has had some leverage over Putin, was able to play the European Union against Putin and vice versa. But ever since the full-scale invasion started, Lukashenko's dependence on Russia has grown exponentially, and yeah, it's basically an extension of Russia. Russification is a massive problem in Belarus. The Belarusian language is on the brink of extinction, basically. It's
Number really suggests that, because Belarus, of course, provides now a lot of even petrol for.
and of course, Belarus is being exploited for resources more than ever right now.
Russia. Zelensky complained that petrol supplies have gone up 13-fold since January, because Russia's having all these problems. But beyond that, Belarus helps Russia with its war effort through production facilities for artillery, through repair plants for armored vehicles and tanks, for infrastructure for missiles and drones, even for infrastructure for the Irashnik missiles.
And the United States have been lifting sanctions on Belarus. And any sanctions lifted on Belarus are sanctions lifted de facto on Russia.
Even as well, Russian nuclear strategic forces. We don't know exactly what nuclear weapons are held there. It's been suggested that they did have tactical nuclear weapons on their territory, but certainly there's that as well. So 500 seems a reasonable estimate of the kind of number of targets that they could have.
But do you think that Kiev would really attack even one of the targets on the long list?
Well, I think what we're seeing at the moment is signalling, and there's certainly no real suggestion that Belarus is preparing for any kind of real involvement in.
Yeah, it would very much destabilize the situation in Belarus domestically if they would.
In the Ukraine war, because each different actors are talking about whether Belarus can be pulled into the war. There's no mobilization. There are no satellite images showing troops moving around to dangerous positions. So this is really signaling, and it's part of a longer term strategy from Ukraine to assert itself more towards Belarus. For most of the war, it treated Belarus as obviously a wrongdoer, a bad actor, because it's really involved in Russia's war. It allowed Russia to invade towards Kiev from its territory at the beginning of the war. But Ukraine have taken a kind of hands-off approach. Don't antagonize them, don't push them close to Russia, don't raise the risk of opening another front, because most of the war that would have been a disaster for Ukraine. But now with its increased capabilities, and that we can see perhaps the end of the war, the end of this stage of the war approaching. Ukraine is taking a different approach, and that really happened when the former presidential chief of staff in Kyiv, Andrei Yermak, was replaced by Kirill Budanov, and we saw that almost within weeks. The Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya was invited to Kiev to talk, and that's really what's been happening.
Right, so
this could be a big chance for Belarus.
Is sort of stuck between a rock, being Ukraine, and a hot place.
Mm-hmm.
That is Russia. But in the long run, can it really oppose Vladimir Putin's will? I mean, if there's
that depends on the outcome of the war. Actually, a lot of, but like the outcome of this war, in my opinion, is not just it doesn't just decide the future of Ukraine. It also is a deciding factor for the future of Belarus.
Enough pressure from Russia, they will finally bow to it.
Yeah, the amount of wiggle room that Lukashenko has is very
limited,
small, especially after the 2020 protests. The Belarusian sovereignty. The level of sovereignty declined even more. Belarus is highly dependent on Russia for almost everything.
Yeah. I've been saying that.
Oil and gas, of course, that's obvious, and also markets. The Belarusian exports to Russia now account for, I believe.
And also, let's not forget that. Let's not forget that Belarus has been sanctioned as well, which increases that dependency.
65% of all Russian, Belarusian exports, in some sectors 90%. So they're all kind of levers that Russia can use with controls on the border, stopping exports, stopping the favourable oil and gas prices. Also with debt that Russia holds, Belarusian debt, it can revalue that debt. It can increase the cost of that debt. And then of course there's a security leverage that it has over Lukashenko's dependent. He's very unpopular at home, and his
very unpopular at home is an understatement of the century.
His position depends to a large extent on
Russia.
On Russia, so he really has not much room. And but this is the room.
So if Moscow says we will not protect you anymore, do you think that Lukashenko would be cornered enough to join the armed struggle against Ukraine?
This has been Lukashenko during most of the war has tried to maintain a position of at least he describes it as neutrality. Ukraine
which is
says differently.
Yeah,
in fact,
it's
they've
not
even
neutrality.
Talked about bringing legal action against Lukashenko as an aggressor. So they see it very differently.
I mean, there's a reason why Belarus has been sanctioned since the beginning of the war. Like, everybody sees what Belarus is doing. Belarus has been used as a springboard to invade Ukraine as well. Some troops have also invaded from Belarus. So let's not even try to entertain the idea that Belarus is in some way neutral in this.
But what's happening at the moment is that Belarus is also going through a softening of the relationship with the United States, releasing hostages for sanctions relief, and that's
and sanctions relief for Belarus is basically equivalent to sanctions relief on Russia. I know.
good thing that the prisoners are being released. But also at the same time, there are some in Europe who are also opening dialogue with Lukashenko. French President Macron, on the French instigation, started a telephone conversation, had a long telephone conversation recently with Lukashenko.
It's just, I'm sorry, but sanctions relief on Belarus is sanctions relief on Russia. I'm repeating it like a broken clock, but it's true. It's true.
And that's very uncomfortable for Ukraine. They see other actors shaping possible future Belarusian posture, but Ukraine have the most to lose from an antagonistic posture. The northern border is an area of vulnerability. So these recent moves, I think, are Ukraine showing themselves not just as a recipient of aid, military equipment, financing, but
I personally think that it's good for Ukraine to be able to put this sort of pressure on Belarus, and it's working. So the proof is in results.
Have aspirations to be a regional actor and want to shape Belarus's posture by themselves as well, at least to be involved in the process.
I mean, of course.
Minsk itself, what's if not Lukashenko's, then what's the regime idea for themselves once the conflict comes to an end?
Well, Lukashenko would like to stay afloat, because if Russia ends up in a losing or vulnerable position after the war, then that could be very damaging to Lukashenko's position, to say the least.
Well, to continue balancing, Lukashenko would like to push forward with the rapprochement with the United States. He's already had a telephone conversation with Donald Trump, in which Donald Trump described him, I think, as a great leader, which is language that European leaders definitely don't describe Lukashenko as. There's
great leader.
Of the United States reopening its embassy in Minsk. And a possible visit by Lukashenko to the White House, and this would really be a kind of a crowning of reinstating his legitimacy, kind of rehabilitation.
So fucked up.
And this is very dangerous for Ukraine, because it comes without any strings, without any conditions.
Yeah.
Belarus can continue to be the kind of, as it's described, a Russian balcony on Russia's.
It's just an extension of Russia. Trump is friendly to Russia, so of course he's gonna be also friendly to Belarus.
Now, Stuart, before we move on to the second segment of the show, I'd like us to listen to Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Okay.
Intelligence obtained from internal Russian documents contain a real assessment of what is happening. And it is the occupier's own assessment. Our pressure campaign is being felt painfully by the Russian leadership. We are reaching their arsenals. Near St. Petersburg, a significant quantity of Baltic Fleet ammunition was destroyed, and similar strikes have been carried out in other areas. Only in the broader Moscow region they collected hundreds and hundreds of launchers for the S-400, 500 and Panzer systems. Almost 90 launchers were withdrawn from other regions of Russia to Valdai, and a special air defense division is still being formed there to keep the Russian leadership safe. On all other routes in Russia to their other cities, they're bringing launchers as well. Such initiatives defend their power and protect the source of this war. Already, in more than 60 Russian regions, there is a shortage of fuel. There is also a strong increase in gasoline prices, diesel prices, if they are, of course, available at all.
Exactly. Today news has emerged that Kremlin is asking Kazakhstan to sell it some gasoline due to the ongoing shortages. But does it mean that the situation is, dire enough to make Vladimir Putin rethink his current policy?
No, I don't think so.
Well, this is the big question. Of course, it's plain to everyone who observes the war that Russia is getting hit hard in all the ways that the Ukrainian president just described. The chokehold of Crimea.
I don't think that's
the
enough.
Logistics lockdown that they call
I honestly don't think that's enough.
Long-range drone strikes on the refineries and all the oil facilities. But Russia wants to restart the peace process. It signalled that.
That's what it says, but does it really want to?
Russia wants to stall. Is somebody just?
I think that both sides want to at least restart talking, but from different
I don't think Russia wants to restart.
Ukraine wants to start talking from the perspective of what we've just described, and that's why it doesn't accept any of Russia's maximalist demands. It wants to start talking from the perspective of the contact line. But Russia sees it quite different. It focuses, and it wants everyone else to focus on its relative successes in the actual frontline situation, and that particularly means its grinding advances that it's making in Konstantinivka, which is the starting point really of the fortress belt, which is the key part of protecting the rest of the Donbass that Russia doesn't have yet, and it is making some progress there. So it would like to the attention at the beginning of talks to focus on that, and that's why.
So let's stop here for a second. So if Konstantinivka is taken, that would mean a breach of the belt of fortresses. Therefore, Russians have an open road to taking all of the Donbas region.
Well, Konstantinivka is the starting point of the fortress belt, and it goes on to Slovyansk. So by taking Konstantinivka, it doesn't mean the fall of the fortress belt, but it's Russia has been grinding through places like Bakhmut, Pokrovsk, Torets, other places, and that we've all heard about in the last couple of years. Kupiansk is the next one that we're talking about. Russia's goal is to take that, probably at huge cost, but which you'll accept, and then move on to the next town on that road. I'm not saying that it will be successful in that, but it sees that it has some relative success there. And when Donald Trump at Evian at the G7 meeting talked about favourably and about Ukraine's way it's conducting the war at the moment, it irritated the Russians because it was talking about those other actions in the rear.
All right, so we have these deep strikes from Ukraine, and we have the ongoing advance of Russian forces along the contact line. Mm-hmm. Now, there's been this ongoing discussion about filling the gaps in Ukraine's defenses by bringing home all the refugees of military age that escaped the war to Europe. Now, do you think that Volodymyr Zelensky will be ready for such an unpopular move?
It would be hugely unpopular in Ukraine, and he's thinking about the next stage of the war after attriting Russia in all the ways that we've been talking about to reach an end to the fighting, and then politics.
I don't think the end to the fighting will happen within the next 40 days. Also, why do I keep getting the why do I keep getting the why do I keep getting the sound? It doesn't seem like anything's happening. So why do I keep getting the, you know. What's with the sounds? Are people subscribing on YouTube or what? Maybe people are subscribing on YouTube. No, it doesn't seem that way. I don't know why the noises, to be honest. I'll have to edit around this.
Will return to Ukraine, probably presidential elections quite soon after that, and a mobilization of young people in the period up to that would be a political disaster.
There's some announcement. Are you hearing this? What the hell was that? I think it was a spoken announcement that it's safe now. I've never heard that happen before. Like I've read announcement out loud. Very strange.
For Zelensky, so I think he'd like to avoid it at any cost. But for sure, the manpower shortage is a huge problem for Ukraine, and it is, for example, on the northern border with Belarus, but Ukraine responded to that with astonishing advances in the
drone technology. Yeah,
not just having the drones, but the way that they're combined with other forces to have an effect on the front line. So that's how they've been mitigating it.
NATO summit will take place next month in Ankara, Turkey. Now, given the fact that, as you say, Ukraine already has its own technology, what can NATO provide Ukraine with to help it win this war with Russia?
Anti-air missiles,
principally
long-range missiles,
air defense equipment.
Yep.
Interceptors.
Like Ukraine is not able to intercept ballistic and hypersonic missiles. That is a problem that Ukraine has.
Platforms, launchers. This is what Ukraine really needs. People are asking what's going to happen at this NATO conference. Is Ukraine going to be invited to join NATO? Is there going to be a political breakthrough? Is there going to be some more talk about?
I don't think Ukraine is going to be invited to join NATO, but we'll see.
Spending limits, what America is going to do. But I think in terms of the war, the big thing that Ukraine can gain is some commitments, promises about providing all that air defense equipment. And also don't forget that in a few months we'll be talking about the approaching winter, so some help with preparing for that as well.
Absolutely so. Stuart Dowell, political editor at TVP World, was our guest.
We're already talking about winter. Jesus Christ, time flies. Time sure flies. We're already talking about winter again, huh?
This afternoon. Thank you so much, Stuart. Always a pleasure. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews here on TVP World.